Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now, most of the people who you're about to hear from did not seek an encounter. In many cases, the moment that stayed with them was not the sighting itself, but the realization that whatever they encountered had already been present long before they noticed it. Now, this episode documents firsthand eyewitness and experiencer accounts connected to Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding Uinta Basin. When examined individually, some of these cases appear isolated. When placed side by side, consistent behaviors, responses, and patterns begin to emerge across locations, witnesses, and decades. Now, if you're new here at the Phantoms and Monsters Radio, we focus on witness testimony, documented continuity, and recurring behavioral patterns rather than speculation or entertainment narratives. Follow the show to track these cases as they continue to develop. Now, tonight is not about proving whether Skinwalker Ranch exists. It's about understanding why this land and the Uinta Basin have produced a continuous record of anomalous encounters for nearly a century, long before television, long before investigators, and long before the ranch had a name. Skinwalker Ranch did not become famous because of stories. It became famous because the activity kept repeating and because people with nothing to gain kept reporting the same kinds of experiences. Tonight, we're not rushing. We are documenting. Now, the Navajo associate the area with a historic vengeful curse, while Ute lore portrays the land as dangerous, haunted by dark, inhumanly fast, and nearly invincible creatures. Now, according to Navajo legend, the region around Skinwalker Ranch is cursed. This curse is often said to have originated from a conflict in which the Ute tribe, allied with the U.S. government, sold some Navajo people into slavery. In retaliation, the Navajo placed a curse on the land. The Ute people believed that this area, particularly the ridge on the property, is dangerous and should be avoided. Now, a skinwalker is described as an evil supernatural being that can transform into a large, often wolf-like creature, sometimes said to be 3 times the size of a normal wolf. These beings are thought to be former healers or witches who have engaged in dark, forbidden practices. The legends surrounding skinwalkers are linked to a range of strange occurrences, including cattle mutilations, UFO sightings, and encounters with large, menacing, and intelligent creatures. The legend provides a cultural context for numerous modern reports of UFOs, cattle mutilations, and unusual creatures at the ranch. Researchers often note the irony that Skinwalker Ranch is named after a Navajo legend, even though it's located hundreds of miles away from the traditional Navajo territory, deep within Ute lands. Now, in approximately 1944, during World War II, a woman employed by the U.S. Indian Service was living near Fort Duquesne, Utah. Her husband had relocated there after being deemed unfit for military service due to a childhood injury. She herself had previously been a nurse with the Indian Service. One day, while pushing her infant in a stroller, she stopped near a small meadow near the school and sat down for a quiet picnic. Without warning, a shiny object flew in from the west. It did not race across the sky. It entered deliberately, made a complete circuit around the meadow, hovered briefly, and departed to the east. Years later, when her adult child asked her to draw what she had seen, she drew a circular globe. She struggled most to describe the movement. It was not smooth, it was jittery and unstable, as though the object were adjusting itself in midair. There was no strong wind that day. But decades later, she considered whether the object might have been a Japanese fugu balloon or hydrogen-filled incendiary device launched during the war. She couldn't be certain. But one thing stayed with her. The object did not drift. It circled. That meadow lies within 2 or 3 miles of what later would be known as Skinwalker Ranch. Now, decades later, a retired Fort Duquesne police officer described an encounter that carried a very different emotional weight. One evening, he and his family were outside their home relaxing, talking, drinking coffee. Without warning, a shiny object passed directly over the house. It did not continue on. It stopped. For a moment, it hung motionless above them, close enough to feel intrusive. Then, without any visible transition, it shot straight upward, accelerating rapidly until it disappeared. There was no arc, no banking turn, and no sound described. The family immediately went indoors. What stayed with the officer was not curiosity. It was a sudden realization that whatever this was had complete control over its movements, and that control was unsettling enough to change their behavior for months afterwards. So in 1994, Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased a 480-acre ranch south of Fort Duquesne. Within days, the activity began. Now, Terry Sherman described a large wolf-like animal attempting to attack a calf shortly after moving in. He fired multiple shots at close range, but the animal did not react. It did not bleed. It did not flinch. It simply turned and walked away. That moment set the tone for everything that followed. Repeated cattle mutilations, dogs found dead, some appearing incinerated, large aerial objects hovering over the property, balls of light moving over the land, large impressions pressed into grass, poltergeist-like activity inside the home, sounds of heavy machinery beneath the ground. The family also reported multiple entities, not one. Bigfoot-like beings, semi-transparent humanoids, intelligent wolf-like animals. After nearly 2 years, the family fled the property. On July 19, 1998, 3 cameras mounted on telephone pole number 1 lost power exactly 8:30 p.m. The inspection revealed wiring was forcibly ripped out. Duct tape was completely removed. PVC tubing twisted and torn free. U-clamps missing. Another camera on pole number 2 was aimed directly at the damaged equipment and recorded continuously. But the footage showed nothing. Frame-by-frame enhancement revealed the cameras lost power while under direct surveillance. Now, Colonel John B. Alexander later confirmed that each camera captured a frame every 1.3 seconds. The extent of damage could not have occurred between frames. Nearby cattle showed no agitation. The event made no physical sense. A native Ute witness described a story told by his grandfather, who had gone to what he called Skinwalker Valley to prove the stories were not real. He described blackened grass, dead-looking trees, animal skeletons, a ruined house. He heard the voice of his deceased grandmother calling to him. He was chased. Later in life, the grandfather showed deep claw marks across his back. Before his death, the witness saw a large black dog with white eyes watching him from across the field. But before we continue, if you're enjoying tonight's presentation and want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. It really helps us to reach more people who's searching for answers about the unexplained. And make sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our live shows. Now, in 1959, near Bottle Hollow, I received an email from a witness later on. Hi, Lon. I listened to an older interview you gave about Skinwalker Ranch and the strange occurrences reported there. I had been familiar with the general area for quite a long time. I lived near Roosevelt, Utah when I was a boy. My family owned land south of town, about 3 to 4 miles from the current Skinwalker Ranch and Bottle Hollow. This was in the 1950s, before the reservoir was built in the hollow. Sometimes we would look east at night and see unusual lights coming from the hollow area. One night I remember seeing a ball of bright white light with a long tail moving along the eastern horizon before it suddenly reversed direction and went back the other way. My father called it spirit light and mentioned that he had seen many in one night when he was a boy. Now, the most shocking and memorable incident I experienced happened on my 12th birthday in September 1959. Our family was sitting outside behind the house enjoying the evening. We had a small party earlier, and the last guest had just left. I had received a refracting telescope as a gift from my parents, and I was eager to try it out. The sky was clear and full of stars that night. As I scanned the sky, I heard what sounded like men talking. The sound was coming from the gully on the east end of our land. As I listened, I noticed my father walking toward me with a fearful expression, as if he had seen a ghost. Suddenly, there was a loud whoop sound, followed by another. I looked back toward the gully and was shocked to see 3 tall human-like figures. The only description I can provide is that they were very thin with long arms and legs. Their heads appeared human, but as we watched, they looked more animal-like. They stood still, staring directly at my father and me with shining black eyes. Then the one on the right raised its left arm and pointed toward the hollow, the area near the current Skinwalker Ranch. My father shouted, "Let us be!" and the figures crouched to the ground and then disappeared. Now, when we got into the house, my father and mother sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that these were the spirits of dead Ute warriors who had been killed by the Spanish and buried in the hollow. They said that these spirits protected the sacred native lands and used magic from the heavens to scare away their enemies. My parents were very aware of these traditions, even though they were not Native American. Now, as I grew older, I began to realize that we know very little about the spiritual world, and even less about the people who lived before us. This account demonstrates a behavior seen repeatedly around the region and across the region, but psychological engagement. 2 men noticed a figure moving among brush and trees near the trailer. It did not charge. It did not reveal itself fully. It watched. When they moved, it moved closer. The most disturbing feature was its unnaturally long neck, which caused its head to bob slightly as it shifted position. After retreating to another trailer, they believed the situation was over, but it wasn't. They later observed its silhouette standing directly in front of a window, motionless, blocking moonlight. Then it vanished without sound. Now, what followed was not physical. It was a mockery. They heard pig sounds, followed by a clearly human voice saying, "Oink," delivered deliberately as though meant to confirm awareness and fear. This was not hunting behavior. This was engagement. Now, this encounter stands out because of an proximity and corroboration. A truck driver stopped along a dark stretch of I-191 and illuminated what he thought was an animal. Instead, he saw a pale, hairless humanoid crouched over a dead coyote, feeding. When light struck it, the creature stood, revealing long limbs and a thin frame and large eyes. It did not flee. It advanced slowly. Only after the driver fled did it stop, standing upright in the road, watching him leave. At the next rest stop, 2 other drivers independently reporting seeing the same entity. This was not a fleeting glimpse. This was a shared encounter. Now, this next account is disturbing because it involves transformation. I was told by the witness, "I have an unbelievable story to share with you. I don't know if you're familiar with Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, but I have a close relative who's a well-known UFO enthusiast in that area. He has been telling me stories about it since I was a kid. I visited the ranch several times, including a trip in the spring of 2013, when nothing unusual occurred. However, something did happen one Saturday night, and I later learned more about it through my UFO relative. Some Ute native kids were driving a tall truck about 8 feet high when they arrived at the UFO ranch gate. They reported seeing an orb of light appearing in the window above the gate. Scared, they turned on their headlights and started their engine. The orb then intensified in brightness and moved directly over their truck. Suddenly, something hit their vehicle, prompting the kids to drive down the road to safety, which was about 3/4 of a mile away. Once they stopped to inspect the damage, the driver inexplicably switched places with the passenger, and there were some girls with them in the truck. When they got back inside, things took a bizarre turn. A creature grabbed the kid who had been driving and yanked him out of the truck, throwing him around like a rag doll, biting him on the backside several times, and clawing at him. Incredibly, this kid managed to get back into the truck, and one of the other kids took a picture of the creature. Terrified, they drove away and reported the incident to the Ute Indian police, who were aware of the ranch's reputation for strange occurrences, and said they couldn't do anything about it. The next day, on Sunday, these kids contacted my UFO researcher relative, who then investigated. Meanwhile, the shaman's wife and the shaman were there to bless the frightened kids. My relative later saw the picture of the creature on his cell phone, along with the damage to the truck. There was even a scratch on the truck that spelled "die," and he observed the injuries on the kid, including the bite marks. Hearing this was truly shocking to me. A few months ago, while working at a hospital, one of my patients turned out to be the shaman's wife, who was also present when my relative investigated. She confirmed everything my relative had said, but provided even more detail. Both she and my relative described the creature as tall enough to reach into the cab of the 8-foot truck. It had horns, red hair, a human-like face, and a distorted, wolf-like mouth, claws, and wings. I asked my relative if this was a skinwalker, and he insisted it was something entirely different. The shaman's wife agreed, saying it was also a different entity. That distinction is critical. Now, Skinwalker Ranch is not a single phenomenon. It is a persistent convergence zone. The same behavior appears: observation, mimicry, physical interaction, avoidance of documentation, awareness of attention. What matters most about the accounts you have heard tonight is not how strange they sound when taken individually. It is how familiar they become when placed side by side. Different decades, different witnesses, different levels of attention, different explanations are offered after the fact. And yet the same behaviors surface again and again. Observation before interaction, awareness without announcement, moments of mimicry or testing rather than outright attack. And a recurring sense shared by many witnesses that whatever they encountered was not surprised to see them. Now, in several of these cases, the most unsettling realization did not come during the event itself. It came later. It came when the witness understood that the encounter did not begin when they noticed something unusual. It began earlier, quietly, invisibly, already in motion. That realization changes how people remember what happened. It also changes how we should investigate it. Because when a phenomenon appears repeatedly across time and geography, adapts to attention, avoids documentation, and presents itself differently depending on who is watching, the question is no longer whether something happened. The question becomes, how long is it been happening, and why does it choose certain moments to reveal itself? Skinwalker Ranch is often discussed as if it were an anomaly in isolation, but it's not. It's a focal point, a place where behaviors that occur somewhere or elsewhere become compressed, layered, and difficult to ignore. Now, the ranch did not create this phenomena. It attracted attention to them. And attention, as we have seen, may be part of the interaction itself. Now, some of the witnesses you heard tonight were ranchers. Some were children. Some were law enforcement, and some were simply passing through. Some were simply passing through and did not speak publicly for years. Not because they lacked conviction, but because they understood how these stories are received. And yet they came forward anyway, because silence does not erase experience. It only delays understanding. This is not a belief. It's a pattern. And the pattern says this did not begin with the Shermans. It did not end with the NIDS. And it did not stop when cameras arrived. They kept coming back, and they still do. Now, if you have experienced anything like this or has had an unexplained encounter or sighting, you can send your report to Phantoms and Monsters. And as always, thank you for listening.